Great to be here with you guys. I'll go and share my screen. We'll get started. I know you guys are busy people. I know you got companies to run, and I do as well. So we'll make sure we get you out of here, right at the top of the hour. And yeah, so today's session is all about the power of a great financial model. It's kind of a 101 on financial models, but the real goal I think of the session for me is just to kind of unlock, like, what is the power of a great financial model? What can it do for your business? And like, how do you build one? How do you use one? So we're just going to touch on those elements. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here given the session because Techstars is very near and dear to me. So as far as kind of who am I and what gives me the right, I'm the co-founder and CEO actually of a company called Forecaster. Forecaster, all we do all day is help founders build great financial models online using software, for their startup. But Forecaster is a Techstars company. And I've actually started two companies, and I've taken them both through Techstars. So my first company was a consumer gaming startup called Fantasy Hub. I went through Techstars Austin in 2015. It was my first company. It was an incredible experience. And then I spent 4 years, excuse me, as a fractional head of finance for startups, building models in Excel, before starting Forecaster, which is a software solution, for that same problem. And then me and the other guy on the screen here, Logan, we started Forecaster. We took it through Techstars Anywhere in 2020, and we've been, at it almost 5 years now. We've raised 13 million in venture capital. We're doing close to 3 million in ARR. So I'm a big Techstars guy. I think a lot of the ecosystem and the program. I'm a big finance guy. Finance is definitely my core competency. It's what I'm best at, and I've kind of devoted my life at this point to financial models for startups. That's what my company does. So yeah, it's an honor to be here, and I hope I can add some value to your day, here as well. And I've also got Jimmy here from my team. He's also part of the Forecaster team, so he'll be here supporting as well. So I just wanted you to know a little bit about me, and then a little bit about Forecaster. So Forecaster is an alternative to Microsoft Excel when it comes to building and managing your financial model. So today we're just going to talk about financial models, right? We're just going to talk about like how to build, how to use a financial model, and you can do that in Excel. You can do that in Forecaster. So that choice is yours, but Forecaster is an alternative. It's something that you can explore. And, obviously as the founder of Forecaster, I think it's awesome. I think you should definitely check it out if you decide to build a financial model for your company. I hope you do. It's online. It's more standardized. It plugs into QuickBooks and Xero in your accounting and has really awesome like reports. And it also comes with an expert analyst. So we give every single one of our 600 customers an expert analyst so that they can work with that human, to make sure they get a great model and make sure that it's updated and relevant and reported to investors and that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty awesome service. We got a lot of Techstars companies, on our customer set, and Jimmy can share some information, if you are interested in checking Forecaster out, because you get a nice discount for being here today as well. So just wanted you to know a little bit about my company and what we do, but like I said, today is not a pitch about Forecaster. I'm not going to try to sell you on Forecaster. If you want to check it out, that's incredible. But we're going to focus on just the topic, which is financial models, right? And like, what is a model? What does it tell you? How can you build your own model and use it, effectively? So we're really going to kind of walk through each piece there. And like Jessica says, a lot of content. So we're going to move relatively quickly to make sure we got time for questions at the end. So we'll jump right in, starting with the what. What is a financial model? When we say financial model, what do we mean? And there's a lot of ways to answer this question, but the way I like to think about it is it's a business simulator. Ultimately, a financial model's job is to simulate your business into the future. That's what it's doing. It's simulating how are you going to acquire customers? How are you going to generate revenue? Who are you going to hire? What is that going to cost, right? Like, it's simulating the growth of your business, the financials of your business. It's kind of allowing you to take your business on a virtual test track, right? Like see what might happen in the future if my pricing is this, if I get this many customers, if I hire, these people, etc. So it's a simulation kind of exercise. And there's two main reasons why we would want to simulate the future, right? Why we would want to try to predict, the future and kind of and shape this out. And that's really to impress investors and to build a great company, And so the one that I think a lot of people know and think about is to impress investors. Financial models are really useful tools in the fundraising game. It's a storytelling exercise. It helps you understand how much cash you need to raise, and it helps you tell the story to investors of how you go from where you are today to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So it's really helpful in that storytelling, which is what fundraising is all about. But the main value of a financial model is to build a great company, is to make good decisions along that path. And so what a financial model really does is it helps you set goals for your company, right? You're setting goals in the model with respect to customer acquisition, with respect to revenue, and then you're managing to those goals. And it helps you understand how you can hit certain goals, and so it really helps you grow your company. But it's also a cash flow management tool. It helps you try to say, hey, who am I going to spend money on? What else am I going to spend money on? What's my expense budget? How much cash do I have in my bank account? And so when is that going to run out? And when do I need to kick off that next raise to avoid running out of capital? So I think that's the real value of financial model that I want everybody to leave here today with, which is that like models aren't just for a data room just to tell a story with investors. Models are for setting and hitting revenue goals, for managing cash, for making kind of the critical decisions that you need to make in order to, play the dangerous game that is, building a startup. So that's kind of the first piece here, and we'll get into that as we look at a real financial model here in just a second. But there's a lot to financial models, right? So a financial model is this business simulator, right? And so there's a lot to your business. So we can kind of ask the question like, well, what is the most important element of a financial model? What should we really focus our attention and energy on? And the answer to that is revenue. So for most of the folks on this workshop today, I'd imagine, if you're a startup, like revenue is what matters most, right? It's like that's what we're judged on when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to success. If you can generate a lot of revenue quickly, you're likely to succeed as a startup founder. And that's a very difficult thing to do because you can't control revenue like you can control expenses, right? Like you have to earn your revenue, and you have to kind of rely on other people for that. You have to create value for that. And so revenue is difficult to predict. It's difficult to control. And the failure to generate significant revenue quickly is actually what kills most businesses. If you ask a lot of people, they'll say, well, running out of cash kills most businesses. But that's more of a symptom and not the root cause. The root cause is a failure to generate significant revenue quickly enough to either turn a profit or attract new sources of capital. And so you run out of money, And so the real focal point, I think, for you as a founder has to be, how do I generate as much revenue as I can, as quickly as I can? And one of the really kind of strong tools you have at your disposal in answering that question is understanding what we call your revenue formula. And your revenue formula really kind of helps you map out what are the KPIs and metrics that drive revenue for your company. How does your money machine work? And therefore, what are the metrics that you should focus on like a laser, right, to drive in order to generate more revenue? And the revenue formula is a critical input to your financial model. So if you have a financial model already, you want to be thinking, how is my revenue formula, incorporated? If you don't have a model, and I inspire you from this meeting, and you're like, I'm going to build a model, this is the first place you start. If you work with Forecaster, this is the first place we start. Is like, what is your revenue formula? Let's map that out. And then and that's the foundational layer to the model. Everything else is built, from that foundation. So that's what I want to go through next year. Is like there's an example, revenue formula. So let's take a business I think that everybody likely knows and understands, which is a simple SaaS business like Netflix, right? Netflix, pretty well known, monthly subscription business. How might they describe their revenue formula? Well, one way they would describe it very simply is their subscription revenue is equal to the number of subscribers that they have multiplied by a price point, right? Pretty simple. Price times subscribers equals revenue. That's a formula. That's a revenue formula. It's a very simple formula, but it's a formula nonetheless. And I like to kind of think of it in a layered format. So you say, okay, Netflix's revenue is equal to subscribers times price. Well, price is an input. That's kind of a driver. As the management team of Netflix, right? We would have some level of say over the price. Subscribers, we could break it down further, right? We could peel back the onion and say subscribers is equal to the subscribers that were subscribing last month at the beginning of the month, minus the subscribers that we lost that canceled their subscription, plus the subscribers that we gained, through new customer acquisition. We could define the subscribers that we lost as those last month multiplied by our churn rate, and we could describe the subscribers that we gained by channel. Maybe we got some of those subscribers from Google and some from email and some from Facebook. And then we can ask, well, how do those channels actually work to drive subscribers? If we took the Google channel, for example, maybe that's a paid advertising channel. And so we have a monthly budget that we put towards Google search ads. We divide that by the cost per click that we're going to get on those ads. That's going to give us traffic to Netflix.com. That multiplied by a certain conversion rate gives us new subscribers. So the exercise here is breaking that revenue metric down into lots of other metrics that feed into revenue, which gives you better visibility into how revenue is generated. And specifically, if you look at the purple metrics on the screen, it helps us identify what we would call drivers, revenue drivers, or levers is another word for it, that drive revenue. So price is a driver. If price goes up, revenue goes up. If churn comes down, revenue goes up. If cost per click comes down, revenue goes up. Or if conversion or our budget are increased, revenue, it will go up as well. And so we now have these 5 metrics that we can focus on to say, hey, how am I going to drive conversion? How can I drive price? How can I get churn down? What abilities do I have to increase my budget? Or how can I decrease my cost per click, right? You can ask these questions, you can generate tactics, you can run experiments. You have a lot more action that you can take to drive revenue versus if you're not thinking about it this way and you just look at revenue as a black box, as a standalone metric, it may not be obvious, what's going to really drive revenue. So that's the first place to start in modeling, is really getting an understanding of your revenue formula like this, which can be done in a variety of ways. I think a powerful way is a visual like this, so you could whiteboard that if you like. Another way to get an understanding of your revenue formula is to kind of write it out in plain English, So this is actually an example company we're going to use. We're going to jump into their model in just a second, but take, just a bit of time to kind of read through this. This is another way to understand a revenue formula. So just take just a second, then we're going to jump into this model. All right. Hopefully you guys had a good chance to skim it. Not going to quiz you on it, but it's a consumer company, Dollar Cave Club. They do man cave stuff, right? So let's jump into this model. So let's take a look at this model, right? And we'll take a look and kind of walk through like what makes this a great financial model. So this is the Dollar Cave Club financial model in Forecaster. And I just want to say, like, everything we're going to walk through here, you can do this stuff in Excel as well. It's very similar in terms of the math and then layout. Obviously, it'll look different in Excel, but this is what it looks like in Forecaster, where you have the Dollar Cave Club model. And I kind of want to walk through what are the core tenets of a great financial model. So as you look at your model now or go to build one, what are you looking for? The first thing you're looking for is a good set of assumptions. So you want an assumptions section in your model where every piece of the business is outlined. So we can see in this assumption section here, if I go to customer acquisition, we can see the channels that Dollar Cave Club uses to generate customers, right? Customer referrals is one of those channels. We're taking the previous month's customers multiplied by 20% referral percentage and then a conversion rate to get to new subscribers. Or Facebook ads is one of the channels. We have a $10,000 budget divided by a cost per click, which gives us traffic. A conversion rate gives us new subscribers. So we have these funnels represented, and that's a really important critical piece, right? That's a critical piece to the revenue formula. That's something that you're going to want to have in your model is the customer acquisition strategies, those funnels that you use. How do those work so that you have a forecast for new customers, just like we do here for Dollar Cave Club. And then as you go down, you have the revenue streams, right? So Dollar Cave Club has subscription revenue by and large. It's a $29.99 price. There's a 4% monthly churn rate. So we have a certain amount of active subscribers. The new subscribers are coming in from customer acquisition. Our subscribers times the price is giving us revenue. So we have that subscription revenue stream represented and forecasted out through time, driven by, churn and price and conversion over on the customer side, right? So it's all kind of representing the business. But we have advertising revenue as well. We have add-on purchase revenue. Dollar Cave Club has a few different revenue streams. So similarly, when you're building or looking at your financial model, you want to have each revenue stream that you offer represented in your model, and that should be connected to customer acquisition. So as customers come in through various strategies, those are fed into various revenue streams, and thereby, you have a revenue forecast for the company going out, I would say at least, 3 to 5 years. So in Forecaster, you can go out as far as you want. If you build in a spreadsheet, 5 years is the standard when it comes to financial modeling, especially for presenting to investors. Operationally, a 2-year model is sufficient, I think, as long as it's on like a rolling basis. But if you're presenting to investors, you want to have that full 5-year picture to show how does this business look at maturity. And it should be a monthly model. So you can look at Forecaster, we can look at it annually, right? Like we could look at it quarterly, but we really want to look at it monthly. We want to build it monthly because just so much can happen in a quarter or a year for your business, and so you really want monthly visibility from an operational standpoint. So notice like we have a monthly, financial model here that goes out. So I can see what that revenue prediction is going to be on a month-to-month basis. That sets me up for something we call the monthly finance playbook, which I'm going to get to kind of at the end, which is like, what's a simple way that you can use your financial model every month to make sure you hit your revenue goals, to make sure you don't run out of cash. Monthly models, set us up for that. So assumptions, you want good representation of the revenue, the rest of the business as well, right? People is the next really big section where you're probably going to hire a number of people for the business. You need to represent those people. Who are you going to hire? When are you going to hire them? What are you going to pay them? That's a critical piece, to the business, so that needs to be represented and on through expenses as well. So you want to have all those assumptions kind of laid out. And then that should be building what we call a 3-statement financial model. So the output of the financial model that you're looking for is an income statement, a balance sheet, and a statement of cash flows, all 3 financial statements represented. This is how we communicate to investors that we understand finances. This is how we use, our numbers to run our business. So we want a full, what we call a 3-statement model, all 3 statements, again, monthly out the next 5 years. And it's the assumptions that are powering the financials. It's like input, output. Assumptions are your inputs and how the model works. And then financials really is just a reorganization of the information on assumptions into the context of the financial statements, which is how we understand our companies from a financial perspective. And it's important that you have these statements as well, because what you want to do, and this is part of the playbook, is once you stand your model up and once you have accounting, right, you want to be comparing how your model is performing against your actuals on a monthly basis, so that if you're hitting your goals, you can be celebrating that, and if you're missing your goals, that's okay. But you can try to understand that and say, okay, QuickBooks says my revenue is X, but Forecasters was saying it's Y, and so why is that? And I need to kind of get to the bottom of that. So that's kind of the structure that we want to use here for the model. And so you just want assumptions, all those listed, financials. You want all 3 statements monthly out the next 5 years. That's what a great model looks like. And just because I feel like it's interesting, I just want to take you guys over to my actual financial model and just kind of build in the open here and just show you like this is like that's a use case there, Dollar Cave Club. Here's a real business's model, right? Like this is my actual financial model for Forecaster in Forecaster. So I just want to kind of show you this as well to see, what a more built out model, would look like. And similarly, right, on the assumptions, like we've got a lot of different channels that we use. We have partnerships. Techstars is a channel of ours, right? We have referrals and organic. We're a little bit bigger of a business now. We've got 600 clients, about 3 million in ARR. So we've got more channels and we've got more information in here. So, and that's part of it, is like, as you build your financial model and as you build your business, you'll go kind of deeper and deeper. So we also have all that kind of customer acquisition, listed out here. Similarly on the revenue stream side, right? Like we have a software component to the revenue, as they're obviously seeing. That's our SaaS revenue, and we've got those different revenue streams listed out here, and we can look at one, for example, to see, hey, okay, we've got churn and we've got, price and all that kind of stuff in here. And then we also do CFO services. So we have CFO services represented in the financial model because that's a revenue stream of ours. So we've got the revenue side here represented, of course, the people, expenses, that's in here as well. So, we've got general and admin expenses, right? We got rent, we got professional fees. So you got to think through, what are the expenses for your business, forecasting those out. And then similarly on the financial side, and I'll show mine to just also show that, like, in terms of that forecast versus actual process, it's really important. Forecaster is integrated with QuickBooks, which is nice. You can do this in Excel as well, but you can click and see, how does my forecast differ from my actuals, and like, what is the level of variance there? So am I hitting my projections? Am I not? And what do I need to do, to change that if I'm not? So, that's a core, I would say, kind of tenet of using a financial model, is making sure that you can map it back to the actual performance of your company, whether that be through the financials like we're doing here on revenue, or things like conversion should be mapped, like your forecasted conversion versus your actual, or churn, or your average price per customer, right? You got to think of those key revenue driving KPIs, and you should be doing like a forecast to actual on those as well, so that you can, kind of refine your model and refine what you're doing to make sure you can grow your company. And so that's actually the last thing I wanted to just show while we're sitting here looking at a real financial model, is like, is more on the usage side. Once you've built out the model, which is complicated and nuanced, and that's where one of those things where in the Q&A and beyond, and whether you're interested in Forecaster or not, I'm happy to help any kind of questions you might have about your specific business, because building the model, there's a lot of nuance and context to everyone's models as they're built. And that's something that, we'd obviously love to help with, either just with free advice, or obviously if you want to work with Forecaster as a client. But once you've built the model, it actually becomes a lot more standardized in terms of how you should use it. And so I just wanted to kind of, walk you through how I use my financial model, and in hopes that would, be interesting to you guys. And so what I do is actually on a monthly basis, I sit down with Logan and with one of our analysts, Nate Jewell, and we basically go through this model from top to bottom. And we look at the last month of historical data. Like here, we've got 39 new customers in June. We look at the next few months of the forecast, and we just ask ourselves a very simple question. Does this seem reasonable? Does this seem attractive? Does it seem like a reasonable goal for the next quarter? Does it seem like an attractive goal? If yes, then we'll look a bit further out. We might look to the end of the year and say, do we think we can get to 50 by the end of the year? And we'll talk about that a little bit. If we're all feeling good about that, then we'll say, yeah, I think we can. Or if we're a little bit dubious, then we'll kind of make some tweaks to the model to pull it down to a level that we think is more reasonable. And then we'll keep going. Then we'll get over to the revenue side and say, okay, well, if we got that many customers, and based on the current assumptions we have on revenue, that would put us at, where by the end of the year? That'd put us at 346,000 in MRR by the end of the year. We think that's a good number, so we're happy with that, right? Or maybe we're like, well, that seems a little high. Maybe we're over forecasting CFO sales. CFO's growing up from 55 to 88. Maybe we think that's a little aggressive, so let's pull that down, right? Or maybe I could put myself in an earlier stage use case. Maybe I'm pre-revenue, right? And maybe I'm like, well, my revenue's supposed to start in September, but I don't think it's going to, because we had those product delays. So let me go ahead and proactively push that out to November, right? But it's just this monthly process of basically revisiting your model, revisiting your recent performance, financial and otherwise, and asking yourself, is this still the plan? Like, is this still the right plan, or do I need to make adjustments to that plan? And so on a monthly basis, we're sitting down, we're reviewing it, we're tweaking it so that it stays a relevant and updated plan and roadmap for what we want to do with the company, because this is how we're managing and reporting to the board and doing all that stuff. And then at the end, right, once I've gone through the business and I've updated the people and the expenses and I've gone through that process, I'm then going down to the cash flow side and saying, hey, what does this mean for the business? Like, right now we've got about $1 million in the bank account. We're closing on actually a little bit over 4 million here on August 1st, which is exciting. So we're getting another round of capital in, and so we kind of looking forward to say, okay, well, based on these projections, where are we at from a cash flow perspective? It looks like we will actually turn a profit in 2026 with a $1.8 million buffer. So we're feeling pretty good about that. But maybe let's say that it isn't the case. Maybe let's say in a different world, we run out of money here in March of 2025. Then I'd be saying, oh, okay, well, I've only got 9 months left. Like, I need to be making active steps to raising capital right now, or maybe cutting some expenses to elongate that. So it's right. It's this proactive, hygienic process of like keeping a relevant plan for your company in place so that you can then look at that plan, look at what that plan is telling you in terms of your runway, in terms of your growth, in terms of, your resource allocation, and then execute based on that, right? Trigger a fundraise or cut some expenses or double down on your paid ad marketing spend to drive more growth, or, but that's what we want to use a model for. It's really like it's a decision-making tool. It's an operational business planning tool. And then it just so happens that, everything that we care about as operators and as founders, investors obviously care about as well. And so this tends to be a very useful then storytelling tool, which is what I've been using even with our raise that we're closing right now. It's like I've been using it to tell the story of like, how do we acquire customers? So I can kind of zoom out and say, hey, this is how we acquire customers. You can see most of the customers come from partnerships. That's where they've come from historically. So I can use that to tell the story of customer acquisition. I can use it to tell the story of my hiring plan and who I'm intending to hire, right? So there's this storytelling element, there's this business planning and decision-making element. So I just wanted to kind of walk through that and just, share my own financial model. So that's that piece. And I thought we'd kind of go back to the deck now, and talk a little bit more about like the build process, because I'm sure anybody that's looking to build a model has questions about that, and then kind of wrap it up and make sure we got some time for questions as well. So now that we've seen a couple financial models in action and we've talked about kind of what a model is and why we want to build them, what can I say about actually building, your financial model? So the first thing I can say is that in my view, there's basically three approaches you could take. There's the DIY approach, like do it yourself build from scratch approach, basically. And that would just be open up a spreadsheet, build it all, right? And there's a lot of I would say that process is rich with learning. It takes a lot of time, and you can get stuck along it, but if you're not a finance expert, but it's very rich with learning. Then there's kind of a middle of the road process, which would be build from a template. Jimmy could actually share a link that we have to a number of really awesome financial model templates that cover lots of different business models. It's a great way, I think, to build a model. If you're not a finance expert and you just want to shortcut the process, it's still free because you're building out a spreadsheet. And you can't just take the template off the shelf and use it. You're going to have to do some work to customize the template to your business. Every business is a little bit unique, but it comes with a lot of the base structure, which is really nice. So that's one route. And then the final route I would highlight is work with an expert. That would be like the route of choosing to work with Forecaster. We're a paid service, and we're going to, not only give you the software, but give you an analyst and build the model with you and own it for you and that kind of thing. And I highlight these three options because whether you build from scratch, build with a template, or like work with Forecaster, you're still building a financial model, but there are different elements to that, build process. So depending, some of you may choose one or the other. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that. Outside of those three kind of avenues, though, the process does follow, I think, a similar step, order of steps, right? Order of operations. And that's what this would be here. And so who does this step? And is it software? Is it template? Is it you? Is it us? Like, that's up to you essentially. But these are kind of the steps you have to take when building a model. And the first step is understanding that revenue formula, like we talked about. So whiteboard it, write it out, build it in using math if your brain works more in a math context. But you have to answer these questions like mathematically, basically. It's like, how are you generating leads? How are you acquiring customers? How are you monetizing those customers? And then like, how are you kind of maximizing your LTV? Like, what's your retention mechanism? those are the four questions, they're kind of building blocks: top of funnel, conversion, price, and retention, that every revenue formula has. So you have to understand that like logically and mathematically, because that's how you then eventually model. Once you have that understanding in step one, you can then do steps 2 and 3, which is the customer acquisition piece of that formula. You can forecast that out on a monthly basis, the channels that you use to drive customers and how those channels work. Once you have a customer count, you can then take that and divide those customers amongst your various revenue streams, or maybe you just have one, and you can describe how that revenue is functioning, right? So that you can forecast your revenue. Steps 1 through 3 are by far the most complicated. They're by far the most important, and that's where you should focus the majority of your time. And so as you go along this process, it's definitely something, like I was saying before, we want to help with, whether that's through our templates, whether that's through our blog. We have a lot of really helpful content on the blog that cover various business models. You can always reach out to me, or of course, we'd love to work with you as a client, as well. But revenue is where you want to start, forecasting revenue, and forecast revenue as a standalone, so that you can then think of the rest of your model relative to revenue. So if you have this revenue forecast, then you can ask yourself, well, what are the direct expenses that I'm going to incur as I deliver that revenue? Are there people? Do I have shipping and handling? Are there database and hosting costs? Like, what are the costs that are going to scale with revenue? I could forecast those as a percentage of revenue, and I could call that my cost of goods sold. What about other expenses? Who am I going to hire to support that revenue forecast? Those people should be in the model. What other expenses do I have? Travel, paid ads, rent, legal fees, etc. You're putting those into the model and forecasting them. And then you end up on the balance sheet. And so there's a lot of folks here. So some of you may have really complicated balance sheets. You may have, hard assets and equipment. You may have long payment schedules and stuff like that. Others may have a very simple balance sheet if you're just kind of a, month-to-month cash business. And so this is a little different for everybody, but step 6 is you have to forecast the elements of a balance sheet, which are assets, liabilities, and equities. For finance pros, those are probably familiar terms. For others, they may not be. The balance sheet is a very technical piece of the financial function, but it's a critical one. It's very difficult to get a accurate cash flow forecast without a balance sheet. So you have to go through the process of forecasting your assets, your liabilities, your equities. I find that it's not anywhere near as straightforward as forecasting like expenses and revenue, because it's just more kind of finance and technical. But that's, again, something that we'd be happy to help you with. If you need help, just reach out. And then, but once you kind of build out the steps 1 through 6, that's the assumption side of the model. So whether you do that in Forecaster or in a spreadsheet, that's the assumption side of the model. Then you have to take that information and just really kind of tie it up to the financial statements. If it's revenue, put it on the income statement. If it's expenses, it goes on the income statement. If it's asset, liabilities, and equity, it goes on the balance sheet. So you're kind of you're tying that up. If you use one of our templates, the tying up piece is largely done for you. It's part of the base structure. And of course that's done automatically in Forecaster, but if you're building from scratch, you'll tie that up. And that's the final piece, is kind of tying up those financial statements as the output of the financial model. So I know that's pretty generic, but it is so difficult to talk about building, just because everybody's business is a little bit different channels, different revenue streams, different hiring plans. So if there's any kind of specific questions, happy to answer them either at the end or after the session. But generally speaking, this is kind of the process you want to go through to build the model. And then got about 10 minutes left. So just the kind of final pieces here I want to talk about are what I've mentioned a few times as the monthly finance playbook. So in my opinion, this is the most important piece of the talk, because there's a lot of energy I find amongst founders that goes into building the financial model and getting it right for investors. But I often find that founders fail to actually use their financial models actively in an operational context. And that's where the model can add the most value, is actually like when you're running your business, using the model as a planning tool, as a decision-making tool, as a hygiene tool, right, to understand the financial health of your company. And we've kind of boiled this down into what we call the monthly finance playbook. I think it's a kind of an hour-long playbook. You could even do it shorter than that, I think an hour is good. So what we advise is everyone is to hold an hour on your calendar every month as a standing meeting. Call it your monthly finance meeting, right? And don't schedule over it. Just keep that 1 hour on your calendar every month and use that to do this playbook, or use that to work in your financial model so that you're building that muscle over time, and you're really using it to kind of like understand and make sure you keep your business on track. And so what the playbook really looks like is, to start, it's just setting your forecast, setting your growth targets with your model. So at this point, you have a model, it's structurally working. You have to put in the inputs, put in the conversion and price and yada yada to produce a forecast, a revenue forecast. You have to put in the people in the hiring plan to produce the expense budget, right? And so you're setting that plan, those targets. And then really you're kind of just putting it on a shelf most of the time, right? You're not in the model, you're out building the business. You're selling the customers and building the product, you're talking to investors, you're doing all the things, and the model sits on a shelf most of the time, and that's okay. And so but then in that monthly finance meeting, when you revisit it on a monthly basis, you want to be basically, able to look at, like, how have I been performing against how I forecasted. So a critical element is tracking and reporting on your key metrics. So if you're looking at your financial model, you'll have metrics like leads and conversion and customer count. You'll have metrics like price and retention and salaries for employees and expenses, right? You'll have metrics for all this stuff. Some of those metrics would live in like QuickBooks. Some of those metrics would live in like Gusto, for your HR. Some of those metrics might live in HubSpot or your CRM or a spreadsheet somewhere. But you just need to make sure that like you've got them somewhere and you can report on them. Because when you sit down and you do that monthly finance meeting, what you're mainly doing is analyzing the results. Like at this meeting, you're sitting down, you're saying, hey, okay, last month, I thought this was going to happen. Customers, revenue, expenses, cash. I thought this was going to happen. This is what actually happened, right? These are my actual results, which I pull from my reporting, spreadsheets, QuickBooks, HubSpot, etc. And I'm looking at those two things and saying, hey, did I hit all my goals? If so, beat the drum. That goes in the update. This is really exciting. We hit all our goals. If you hit some of your goals, if it missed others, then you say, okay, well, I went over budget. Why did I go over budget? What expenses pushed me over budget? How could I avoid that in the future? Or maybe I came in light on revenue. Well, did I not get enough customers, or did I not sell at a high enough price? Or maybe I thought I was going to start generating revenue this month and I didn't. So like, why didn't I hit my revenue forecast, and what can I do differently next month to change that, right? And so you're kind of going through this process of asking yourself, okay, did I hit my goals or not? And what am I going to do differently, so that you can then tweak and repeat. At the end of the meeting, you're basically either going to tweak your model to match it up to the realities of your business, or you're going to tweak your behavior, right? To try to hit those goals, right? You're either going to tweak your behavior or tweak the goals if there's a delta between your goals and reality. Because like either the goals are unrealistic and you need to bring them down, or what you're doing maybe isn't working and you need to bring it up. Or maybe you say, hey, yeah, I didn't miss the goals, but I still think we're doing the right things. I still think it's going to happen. So like, so we're good. So you may tweak, you may not tweak, right? It's just a matter of like looking at that, asking yourself that question, and then either tweaking the plan or not, tweaking your behavior or not, and then repeating, and then like putting the model back on a shelf and running the business for another month. And so it's this circular process where like you've built the model, you've stood it up, then you're just going to execute on the business for the month. You're going to be tracking the key metrics you need to run that comparative process. You're going to be analyzing, how did I do against those metrics, over the last month? And based on that, you're either going to tweak the model, tweak your behavior, or tweak nothing at all, and then you're going to do it all over again. And like the way I think about it is like setting milestones. If you're on the venture path, if you're maybe here you are right now, maybe you say, hey, 12 months from now, I want to raise, a $2 million seed round. What are the milestones you need to reach to get there, by when? Set those milestones out in your model, build your model towards those milestones, track towards them every month, and make sure that like you still have a path to reach those milestones, so that once you reach those milestones, you trigger the seed process, you raise the seed successfully, the game doesn't stop. Now you just set the milestones out into the future for the Series A, and you run the whole process again. So it's really this kind of rhythmic, operational, kind of hygienic process that you're running to make sure you can hit your goals and avoid running out of cash. And if it's, if once you get into the flow of doing it, it really need not take more than about an hour a month. If there's a lot of changes you're making, maybe a couple hours, or the first couple times you do it, it might take you a couple hours because like you're building a new skill, you're building a new muscle, and so or you get in and there's some metrics you don't have, and so there's friction. But once you get into the process of doing it, it runs pretty easily, and I've seen it create a ton of value, for companies, and just making sure that like you're putting yourself in the best position, to win. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I got for you guys here today. I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions and stuff like that. I will just say, I'd be remiss to say, as the CEO of Forecaster, you do get a discount. You get a great discount, for Forecaster, just for being here today and kind of being a part of the greater Techstars ecosystem. So we'll give you 20% off your whole first year at Forecaster if you are interested in working with us. And like I said, you get the platform that I showed you. You also get an expert analyst assigned directly to your account, just to make sure that we take as much of the work off your plate as possible, that you get the best possible model. And yeah, all we do is work with venture-backed startups and startups in general. We got a little bit over 600 of them. So that's our jam. And with that, now I'll kind of open the floor. Let's hit some questions, as many as we can, in the next 17 minutes here. So
yeah, thanks, Stephen, for that great presentation. And you covered a lot. So there were a ton of questions that came in. But before we dive into that, I wanted to share that we will share this recording afterwards. So you will have access to the recording, and you will have access to the slides that are shared in the recording. So that's what you'll be seeing. So all right, we'll go ahead and dive on in. Stephen, if you don't mind, I'm just going to stop sharing your screen, if that's okay, just so that way we can have you on stage. Awesome. Thank you. And then I will also highlight myself. Great. So actually, most of our questions that are coming in are from very early stage founders. And a lot of them come around, how do I even get started with projections and all of that? So I'm going to read off a few and kind of group them in together, if that's okay for you. So the first one that we have is, where do I start to forecast if I have information that I want to share in a pitch or a business idea? Do you have any tips for people who are just getting started with that?
yeah, definitely. So if you're just getting started, there's two things that are really important to do. One is, don't wait on the model. Go ahead and build one, because like I think the best time to build a model is right when you're getting started on a business. It's a great tool for storytelling with investors, especially when you don't have data, because you're trying to tell that story. It's also a really great tool to help you understand like what actually needs to happen in order to succeed in this business. So that's one thing, is don't wait on the model. But the other thing is, don't over engineer it. Start simple. My approach on when you're just getting started is build what's called the MVP financial model, right? So just like you build an MVP product, you don't have data, you don't really know what the market wants, but you just take your very core essence assumptions and you build the essence of the product, the simplest way you could build it. You test that in the market and you grow it and you expand it and you evolve it over time. Same thing with the financial model. So when it comes to, forecasting, if you're really just getting started, you may not even list out a bunch of different channels and forecast how those work. You may just say, well, look, I'm not even sure exactly what channels I'm going to use, but I know I'm obviously going to acquire customers. And so maybe I start, by acquiring, like getting like 10 leads, and I close 10% of them. So that's one customer a month. And then there's 10 leads, I can grow up to 50 leads over the next 18 months. So I do that. And that gives me a bit of a customer acquisition forecast. And then I can jump to revenue and say, well, there's like 3 different ways I'm thinking about generating revenue, but the main way is like selling that e-commerce product. So let me just start with that. So let me just assume all these customers buy this one product. It's $60, right? So like you just try to kind of just boil it down, simple it down as much as you can, to start the process structurally, right? So there's the structural question of how to get started when you're really early. Keep it really simple, keep it just to the very core things you believe to be true about the business. And then there's the question about, well, how do you actually put inputs into that? What's a good conversion rate? What's a good price point? And how do I actually put inputs into that structure that actually makes sense? And my answer there real quick would just be, don't sweat it too much. Like the only thing that's really going to tell you what your inputs should be, what your drivers and assumptions should be, is the market once you start getting data. So just to start, just go with your gut. And just like, put what your gut tells you, just literally start with that. And you might say, well, my gut doesn't tell me anything. Well, flip a coin, just put something in there to get it started, basically. That's all, and then once
Yeah.
you've got it started, once you have something up, share it with people, right? Share it with other founders, share it with current investors you may have, share it with like that founder in your ecosystem who's experienced, has done it a few times, and just sit down with them and say, hey man, can I walk you through my assumptions? Like, here's what I'm thinking. Like, am I crazy? Do you think that's reasonable? And if you do that with like 5 people and they're all like, I mean, it looks reasonable to me, then you're probably good for now. Just like run with that. And as you get data from the market, refine it. If 5 out of 5 say there is no way, I'm sorry, that you're gonna get a 70% conversion rate. I'm sorry, man. Then it's like then you're like, okay, let me pull that down. Right. And so that's what I would say. Just kind of start simple. Don't sweat too much about it. It's gonna be wrong, but it's directional and it's all about just kind of learning and understanding the business and then communicating that.
Yeah, I love that. I think for just to add on from a Techstars perspective, like when we're reviewing these revenue models in the application and the financial models as well, what we're looking at really is what is your thought process through all of this? What research have you done for this? How did you get here to that assumption, right? So we know that it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's more about what type of mentors and advisors have you spoken to get advice on this as well. That's what we're really looking at. So thanks for answering that. And along those lines, another question that came in was, how much do you have an idea of how much you should forecast for investors when you're pre-revenue? Like, I know you mentioned 5 years, but is there a specific reason for that, or do you have any advice on that?
Yes. So I think 5 years is the market standard. So I would definitely suggest 5 years. The reason for it largely is you want to paint the picture of like of realizing your vision. And you want to paint the picture of what like a mature, interesting, big company that's going to generate ROI looks like. And so it's all story. Like nobody has any idea what your revenue is going to be in 3 to 5 years if you're just getting started. So you don't know, I don't know, investors don't know, nobody knows. And so it's not about getting it right. It's just about communication, right? And so you're trying to communicate, hey, here's how big I'm looking to build. Am I looking to build a, more sustainable business that's going to grow like that? Am I looking to build a venture business? And in a couple of years, your business typically, if you're just getting started pre-revenue, in a couple of years, your business still won't be generating a ton of revenue. It probably won't be profitable. It's not like you're not showing like a great exit point, right? So you want to forecast 5 years so you can say, hey, over the next year and a half, here's what I'm really focused on operationally. Here are my milestones. Here's what I'm focused on building. Here's what I'm focused on doing so I can unlock that next round. But big picture, here's kind of generally, directionally where we're planning on going, and so that the investor can get a good head around it. And like, this is a big business. This is a really exciting business that's going to generate a ton of ROI for you as an investor. Like, we'd love to have you in. So you want to kind of show the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and how you're going to get there. And I think, Jessica, you nailed it with the thought process piece. It's all about the thought process. So investors want a window into your head of like, how are you thinking about the critical things that you need to do right now to get to that next step? But also big picture, right? Broad stroke. How are you thinking about it long term? How are you thinking about your growth trajectory and what your exit point is? And like, and it's a good filter because I'll say, as someone who's viewed hundreds of financial models, I can easily look at a financial model and say, okay, this person's experience, they understand what's expected and what's possible, when it comes to building a venture company. And then I see models that are just blasting off the page with meteoric growth that are faster than any company's ever grown in history. And I'm like, okay, this founder probably doesn't quite understand what's possible and what's realistic and what's expected when it comes to venture growth. And so I think if you nail that and you put a ramp in front of an investor that's like kind of right in the sweet spot, it says a lot, about your level of maturity and financial sophistication.
Great. Love it. So I see a lot of questions actually about Forecaster. I'm going to dive into that a little bit. That way we have enough time, and then we'll dive back into other questions as well.
Sure.
So there were some questions about how to get in touch with your team if somebody's interested in learning more about Forecaster. Is there a way to schedule a demo?
Yes, absolutely. So Jimmy, I can drop a fresh link in the chat, but basically we are very kind of a human first business. So Jimmy will drop a link. You can use that just to fill out, just tell us a little bit about your business and schedule a demo. And we will get on with one of our reps. They'll learn about your business. They'll talk you through kind of how Forecaster works. And then if you like it, they'll actually assign you an analyst and they'll schedule you a kickoff call with your very own financial analyst. And that is when the process of building it will start. And that analyst will actually sit down with you, really just kind of ask you a lot of questions, kind of understand your business, and then work with you to actually build your financial model out in Forecaster and stand it up. So that we can kind of get you on the ground running.
Awesome. And how much can you customize the model itself? Because there was a question about adding unforeseen expenses, like a line just for random things. Is that
Yeah,
possible?
it is. It is. So one of the so I've spent years building financial models in Excel before starting Forecaster, and my co-founder Logan did too. And one of the kind of core tenets of our software is the flexibility. And so like one of the things I think you'll find in Forecaster is pretty much anything you can build in Excel, foundationally you can build in Forecaster. Like you can't use all the fancy functions some that Excel can use necessarily, but like from a business building context, it's all very flexible. So like unforeseen expenses or various business models, complicated business models. I mean, we work with over 600 clients at this point, anything from like very simple monthly SaaS businesses to I've got businesses taking human waste and turning it into fertilizer. We've had businesses turning bugs into, kind of eating plastics, and companies going to space, and companies doing CPG and ecom, and enterprise SaaS. Like kind of any business model, any kind of hiring plan, that kind of stuff, typically Forecaster can take on. And that's another one of those reasons why we decided to take that kind of human approach, where sometimes your business is really complicated. And if you're not a finance expert, it's just a really tall task, I think, to understand how to build the model in the best possible way that's useful, that tells a good story, et cetera. Our analyst team, we've got 11 on the payroll now. All they do all day is build models for startups, and they do it for lots and lots of different startups. So, they can really make sure that you get the model that you need and you deserve and that works well for you, and kind of wade through that complexity, right, in the best possible way.
So this is actually a great segue into the next question, which is from Dimitri. Can you explain the best way to present a complex financial model? Because you mentioned a lot of complexities that can happen when you're building this out. And there's actually been a few questions of like, hey, I have 3 different types of revenue models. How do I input that into a financial model and make it more simple for myself? So any tips there of like how you could start presenting that or simplifying that?
Yes. So there's a couple things I'll say, and I'm assuming you're talking about presenting to investors, but you could be presenting
Yes,
to your employees or whatever.
presenting to
Okay.
investors
So
specifically.
when presenting to investors, there's a couple things I would say. Like the first, just if I had to summarize it in a word, I'd say present it strategically, right? So present it strategically, which if we unpack, that means present it at a high level and present it at a strategic level. So you're not presenting it like, here's how this formula works and works to generate this specific number, right? That would be very much in the details. You're presenting it like, strategically, we use partnerships to drive customer acquisition. We run webinars and people fill out demos, and some people decide to work with us. Like that's like a strategic, like that's as deep as I would go. That already goes into tactics, but it's like you're at that kind of high level. Or like strategically, we do an expertise for exposure exchange, and this is represented in customer acquisition, as you can see here, blah, blah, blah. It's like, so you're doing like a high level strategic overview when you're presenting a model. You're almost thinking about it like a pitch deck. In a pitch deck, you're not going into the details of your business. You're broad brush skimming the surface points of your business. The model should be the same thing. So when you present the customer acquisition, present the strategy of your customer acquisition and the milestones that you want to reach. When you present the revenue, present strategically, like just basically what is your business model and what are those milestones, right? So think high level, think strategic, think really short, 2 to 3 minute statements about each section, and then get the investor talking. It's really all about conversation when you're presenting the model to investors. What you actually want to do is talk with the investor back and forth about the model. So I would just like think strategic, think high level. And in terms of like the complexities of a business and what to include in the model, think anything that's core to that strategy. So when you think about customer acquisition, you might think about 15 different potential channels you could use, but you're like, yeah, but I really think these 2 or 3 are going to be really the ones that matter. Then maybe
Mm-hmm.
just include those 3 because those are the ones that strategically you want to talk about and that are going to matter the most. The rest of it's just kind of noise,
Yeah.
or on the revenue side, similar picture. On the expense side, similar thing. So just think about what's strategic, what's important, like what's really kind of mission critical there and keeping it relatively high level. Structure the model and present the model, with that in mind.
That's great advice. I love that. All right, I think we have time for one more question, and I love this question. So, since you've seen a lot of financial models, do you have any advice about 1 to 2 common mistakes that you've seen in like a 5-year projection? Are there any red flags that you think that would come up for investors? Just any advice there.
Yeah, great question. And yes, it's definitely the answer. So the 2 that come to mind the most are number 1, failing to include customer acquisition in the model. There's a lot of models I see that just magically kind of assume customer acquisition. They're just like, well, we'll get 100 customers, this month, and then 120, and then 140. And they're just like, and there's no insight into the channels or how or anything like that. It's just the customers just magically appear. And so like if you're at the very, very idea stage of the business and that's the best you can do, like that's okay. But like it's much better for investors and for you and for everybody to understand like, well, how do you think you're going to acquire customers? And so I see a lot of models that just basically start at revenue. They'll just grow revenue, but they're not really growing customers. And that's a big piece of the business. It's a big missing piece. So start with customer acquisition and at least include the couple main channels you're going to use there and try to force yourself to forecast how that's going to work. The second, by far, most common mistake that I see in models is frankly just over optimistic forecasting. I think, we're all founders and and we all think our businesses are just going to blow up, and so that comes out a lot of times in the model, and that's a good thing from a certain perspective. Like it's what makes us, get up in our own delusion and work so hard every day to build these businesses. But it's also, I think what comes off to investors as confidence and like and thinking big and that kind of stuff. So that's good. You just need to make sure it's not so crazy that it kind of triggers a BS meter, because if it's so, fast, then it might say, look, like to investors, like this person really doesn't really get it. Like, it's like, and so you just don't want that because that might not even be true at all. It's just like you don't want them thinking that. So just make sure that like, you're optimistic with your projections, but make sure that you really look at that and think with a straight face, like, yeah, I can hit that. And also don't rely on just yourself. I think but before you go to market with it, when you build the model like that, take that output, share it with 10 people you think would really know, investors, experienced founders, etc., and say, do you think this revenue forecast is attractive but reasonable? Is it attractive but reasonable? And if 10 out of 10 say, yeah, that's attractive for sure, and yeah, I think that is reasonable. I think those are, numbers you could hit, then you're probably good. If they're like, well, it's definitely attractive, but I don't think there's any way you're going to hit that. Well, then you may want to bring it down. And if they're like, well, look, it's really reasonable, but honestly, I think you could probably reach higher than that. Then maybe you want to make it a little bit more aggressive. So that's what I'd say.
Oh man, that's a great way to end this presentation, that little last piece of advice. So thank you so much, Stephen, for all of your time today. And also Jimmy for helping us out in the chat too. Really appreciate it. And everyone on the call, we will send out this recording afterwards and the contact information for Stephen's team too. So you won't miss out on any of that. But thank you for joining us, and we hope you learned a lot.